Hello and welcome to another episode of Fundy Tidings. I'm your host Jay Remer, and with me today is Matthew Dickson. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Hello.
So today we're going to talk about a very big topic. We're going to be talking about mental health. So Matthew has had a lot of experience in mental health, as have I, and but we're not experts other than our own life experience, which we would like to share with you. So Matthew, would you like to sort of give a little introduction as to what your interests in the field of mental health are, and perhaps a little bit about your background?
Well, I've got schizophrenia, so I've got a lot of history with mental illness and have been in the mental health arena for years. But a couple of years ago, I found a TED Talk that talked about mental health in developing countries, and it really opened my eyes. I had no idea it was so bad for so many people. So I've been focusing on my own recovery for the last 25 years, and the good news in that is that I'm finally back up on my feet again, and I'm incredibly happy about that. It is so nice to have peace and contentment, and it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to advocate, and for years I thought, once I get back up on my feet, what could I do to give back to other people? And I thought I'd be helping people here in Canada, but when I discovered what was happening in developing countries, I thought I should probably be helping people who need it the most. There are over 270 million people in developing countries with no mental health care. That number seems low to me, but that's what the World Health Organization says.
That may be just a statistic that they use in measurable countries, because with 6 billion people on the planet, it's probably more like 5.5 billion have no access to mental health care.
Yeah.
What is it about the developing countries that piqued your interest so intensely?
Well, going through mental illness here in Canada, I felt like I was living in a war zone. It was an utter nightmare. It was terrifying. And the whole time I went through it here in peaceful Canada, my heart went out to people in developing countries who, living in extreme poverty or in a war-torn country, who have mental illness to go through as well. I'm like, how do you do that? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
So did you see a similarity between the terror that you experienced and the terror that you see others experience in developing countries?
Yeah, I had no idea life could be that bad. I had absolutely no idea life could be that horrible and miserable. And I'm trying to give back. So I'm trying to focus on people who need it the most.
One of the things that you've done is you've come up with an amazing website. And I looked at the website and was really impressed with the professionalism and with the extent of resources that are underutilized but are readily available, and almost household names like the World Health Organization and others like it. How did that website develop, and how are you using it? It's called MindAid.
Yeah,
.com, right?
.ca.
.ca.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I got a web designer to make that about a year ago, and I wanted to sort of give a brief. Like, I'm not an expert in the field of mental health in developing countries. I'm new to this. I hope I'll become more of an expert as years go on. But So I got him to make it, and I just wanted to give a brief overview because I found a lot of the information on the web was scattered. There wasn't really one cohesive place where I could find a good summary of it. I had to go looking in a lot of different places. So I've tried to do that with my website. I'm like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm trying. I steer people towards basic needs if they want to help. They're the largest international nonprofit helping in the field. They're relatively small. They have a $1 or $2 million budget for the year, but they go into a community, and they work in about 14 countries, and they go into a community that has nothing. Some people with mental illness are chained up in some countries, and the World Health Organization actually created a a chain-free initiative in 2006. So what they do is they go into a community and they teach people, they handpick some of the people there to give, and teach them how to give basic mental health care to those who need it. And that model they use, it's modeled after an older guide of how to give basic physical care to someone where there's no doctor, like how do you treat malaria or a broken leg. And someone years ago said, well, why don't we do this for mental health? Mm-hmm. And they've done it. They have a 100-page document that people can use. And this model is low cost, proven effective, and scalable. And the World Health Organization is trying to figure out the best way to roll it out to the masses. But until they do that, I'm trying to steer people towards basic needs. I mean, there are other groups doing similar work.
So Basic Needs is an organization, and it is basicneeds.com?
Basicneeds.org.
.org,
yeah.
Okay. And their mission is to focus on mental health in developing countries, and they are at the moment involved directly in 14 different countries?
I believe 14, yeah. I'd have to look again, but I said, I'm not an expert.
No. Well, it's amazing. Matthew, when I spoke with you, I had 2 opportunities to chat with you at length before we decided to do this recording. And I was struck by a couple of things. One, the amazing courage that it takes to go through what you went through, and the amazing amount of work that it takes and dedication that it takes to go from step to step. My feeling is that there are a lot of people that could relate to a lot of the experience that you went through, and I'm just wondering whether or not you could share some of the experience that you went through personally, so that others who may either be suffering from mental illness themselves, who may be watching, or friends and family of those people, or professionals who might gain some insight from what you have to say, because you're very well spoken and you have a great story. So would you be willing to share some of that with us?
Yeah.
Very good.
So I got diagnosed in 1994, and things were a lot different back then. You could not talk about mental health as easily as you can today. It's changed a lot in the last 10 years. And one of the biggest things that helped me was reading. For me, it was reading books. I went on the internet a bit and just learning basic overall health tips. To be honest, just lifestyle factors. There wasn't, with the disease, they said, if you can find a medication that works, stay on it. They found a medication that worked. It worked glacially slowly, but it at least worked, and I took that. And the other thing you can do is get counseling. And for me, I went straight to the books after, well, not right away, but it took a number of years before I started reading up on this stuff. And there are tons of information on mental health tips. Like I looked up sports psychology, how soldiers get through extreme events in war. There's all sorts of things in the personal development sector in the bookstores and online too.
Were there any red flags that said something's wrong here and I need to do something about it?
Yeah, so throughout university, I just didn't feel good, and that was the early 90s, and Prozac wasn't even on the market yet. I didn't know anything. I had never heard of antidepressants or mental illness. In high school, we learned about mental health, but we never talked about bipolar or OCD or anxiety or depression or schizophrenia. I didn't know about any of that stuff, and I muddled through university, and I told people, I'm feeling this way, I'm feeling that way, but people didn't know what to do really. Mm-hmm. But anyway, at the end of about 4 years of going through that in university, when the disease hit, it hit hard. It was one day you're muddling through school, but still, I bicycled across Canada. I'm not feeling not feeling the best, but I got an engineering degree, but it but nothing was preparing me for what was going to come down the tubes. It was really bad.
So when the disease hit, you say it hit suddenly like a lightning bolt?
Well, I wouldn't say a lightning bolt, but I was scared I might kill myself, and I phoned a friend. He said, "Why don't you go up to the University Health Clinic?" And I did. They took me up to the local hospital, and that was my introduction into the mental health system. That was 1994. And then, they analyze you or poke and prod you for a while, and then after so many weeks, they say, "We think you've got schizophrenia." And that is a real, so in a matter of weeks, it wasn't really a lightning bolt, but within a matter of weeks, I was basically, I wasn't doing well.
Right. And so what was the next stage? Because I know you said that you spent some time in hospital, quite a lot of time. Was that your next step, so to speak?
Well, in 25 years of recovery, the actual time in hospital was quite low. I was in the hospital, in the psych ward, 6 or 7 times throughout the course of a good chunk of the year. And after that, I was in a group home, and for the next 3 years. And after that, I've been living on my own. And I mean, I've had a full-time job, I've got a house, car, that sort of thing. But it was not easy to do that. It's a very, you do things and people see you out and about and think, oh, he's going through life, how hard can his life be, sort of thing. It's bad. It's really bad.
And what advice might you have for other people who may be having similar thoughts?
Well, similar thoughts before they know they need help, or after?
People who may just not be feeling well, or may be depressed, or may have suicidal thoughts, or may just be confused. There are a lot of symptoms that can spark mental illness of one kind or another. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what would you advise people who are feeling off-center, highly stressed, to do?
You want to isolate yourself, and that's the tendency in a lot of people, to isolate yourself, and it just isn't good. You need to, as hard as it can be, try to reach out to other people. And for other people, in response to that, is I wish people could understand where people are, their state of being, their mood, instead of not being able to read that in people. And one of the big things I'd like people to see, to do, is to learn emotional intelligence and just to find out where people are. I didn't have that when I was younger. I wasn't too bad, but I've gotten a lot better. And I can see now people, they're just from their body language and their mood, their emotions, where are they? Do they need a hug? Are they angry? Are they upset? And I think if people could see that in others more easily, it would just make people understand. It would help to understand where people are and how they can help them. So
I know last year, for a number of years, the topic of emotional intelligence has certainly been front and center, at least in my world. It has been, because it's what I write about quite a lot and study. And we tried to introduce this. We are trying to introduce this into the school system, and so your experience has been, though, that there is a general lack of understanding of how to regulate your emotions.
Yeah, it's a lot of people are suffering from mild to, 20-25% of the population has mental illness. The other 75-80%, they could use improvement too. There's a whole field of positive psychology that was made, I think, in the 90s, and up until then, psychiatrists only looked at people they tried to make sick people less sick, but with positive psychology, they try to make healthy people healthier. And I think if more people could just take charge of their own health and try to get better and just improve their skills and abilities and just being happier and helping other people, that's, yeah.
So is it the kind of thing where, so in your experience, did you find that connecting with other people, for instance, in the group home, was that a beneficial? I mean, you were there for a while, so I'm assuming it was beneficial. The interaction with other people was critically important to your recovery?
Yeah, with me, at my worst, I really didn't like being alone. I really did not like that, and that stuck with me for the bulk of my recovery. It's, I'm starting to be able to get used to being by myself. Well, I improved every single week for the last 25 years. Yeah, every week was a little bit better than the week before. So I got better at things. It was still never perfect, but I slowly improved, and connecting with people, as hard as it is, it's, yeah.
So, what I'm seeing here is the connection between the isolation that you hated and caused, I guess it caused further terror. If you connect that to the methods that are being used in developing countries of chaining and isolating, and even in North America, where solitary confinement is often sort of a last resort or a first resort, depending on who you're dealing with, you're finding that that is counterproductive to healing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, going through what I went through, you're just living on the edge. You don't know what's going to happen from one moment to the next. It's terrifying. It's chaos. It's utter unknown. And you're so just kind of hanging in there just by a thread, that you're scared of other things happening in your day that could throw you off center. And I mean, it's terror. And that was here in a great country. Other countries have so many other problems, and it's not right.
Mm-hmm. Were there any sort of moments along your journey where there were sort of light bulbs lit up, and it was like, ah, oh, thank goodness, or sort of moments when you could exhale in your recovery? Because you mentioned that you noticed improvements on a week by week basis, and I'm wondering, in those improvements, if there were moments of lucidness that said, ah, this is...
No, I never had a break. I slowly improved week by week. The only break I got was at nighttime. That's when I slept. When I slept, there was no pain. In the early years, when I woke up in the morning, my first thought was, please just get me through this day. And I didn't want to have to go through the day. And every day I did. When I went to bed at night, and the day was incredibly long. And the 16 hours most people are awake felt like about 100. And when I finally made it to the end of the day and I went to bed, I was just so thankful. I felt that, I could get 8, maybe 9 or even 10 hours of just no pain. And the oddest thing about it was that, I know when you sleep, time goes by faster, but it literally felt like about 5 or 10 seconds passed, and I was awake, and I had to go through the onslaught of the day all over again. So I got breaks at nighttime, but I'm just starting to finally have lucid thoughts, I guess you could say, or a sense of peace and contentment. It slowly came in, and for me, I had a fairly stable recovery. There are ups and downs, just like everybody has ups and downs in their life. But for the most part, I know a lot of people have the revolving door of mental illness. They feel better, they go off their meds, and then they get sick again, and up and down, up and down. And I wasn't really like that, mm-hmm. for the most part.
Now, you said that one of the things that you did to help in your healing process was you were a voracious reader. Were there any books that sort of stand out that were, say, perhaps like, you got to read this book, whether you have mental illness or not, you got to read this book?
Yeah, I've read hundreds and hundreds of books over the last 19 years, and one that stands out that I think a lot of people suffering could really gain a lot of wisdom from is The Survivor Personality by Al Siebert, Siebert, and he studied people and how they got through the Holocaust, natural disasters, car accidents, injuries, cancer, alcoholism, and he found they all had some common themes running through how they got through what they got through. And yeah, I found that book in 2010, and I always wished I'd had it years and years earlier. That helped me immensely.
Mm-hmm.
Another book that I think should be required reading in schools is this one right here, Verbal Judo.
Mm-hmm.
It's written by a police officer. There's a newer version of it out now, and it's how police officers deal with people. And the beauty of it is that it's so simple to use. Well, if you he doesn't really teach you how to gain emotional intelligence. That's sort of left up to you. But I did, and I used that system, and it's wonderful. I think people working in mental health care as caregivers or should use it, and I think everybody should know about this because it's.
So it's called Verbal Judo: The Gentle Art of Persuasion, and it looks like a great book. I mean, it looks like a great book that anybody would benefit from reading. Matthew, so if we look at if you've been involved in the mental health system in Canada for 25 years, what is your analysis of the mental health system in Canada right now, and where it might improve?
I'm not really an expert in that field, and I know I should be. I know I should know a lot.
No, just from your personal, just an opinion from you, because you may not be an expert, but you have more experience at it than the average bear, so to speak.
Well, I read recently that there's a shortage of psychiatrists in America, and I'm sure the same in Canada, and I'm guessing worldwide. I know like some countries have 1 psychiatrist per million people, but in Canada it's 140 psychiatrists per million people, and I think the largest in the world is Norway with 480 psychiatrists per million people. So that's psychiatrists. There's other mental health expert roles you can become, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I should be encouraging younger people to go into that field, and because, well, it's, yeah.
Well, psychiatry is one thing, and psychology is another, and there are other, social workers are another, and they all have the ability to counsel people professionally, and they're trained to do that. So would you say that actually increasing the number of healthcare professionals in the mental health field would be a place to begin?
Perhaps.
Is accessibility an issue, or seems to be okay?
I know the people when I talk about my own experience with other people, just in passing, I hear a lot of people say they're not getting the mental health care they need. People are struggling here in North America and I'm guessing other developed countries. We need a lot of work ourselves, but at the same time I'm thinking, well, we do have millions of dollars spent on this. We have psychiatrists, we have hospitals, we have social workers, programs, awareness. It's unreal, actually, the infrastructure we do have for all this. It's not enough and where it should be, and we're talking about it, which is good. In the last 10 years, we're talking a lot more about mental health, and those are all good signs. But some countries, they have no clean water. They're living in a mud hut. The nearest hospital is 500 miles away, and there's someone there tied to a tree or to a bed. Some people are actually put in a cage with a hyena, and they end up injured or killed. It's really bad, and yeah.
So, getting back to a statement that you made a moment ago about emotional intelligence, and people have to learn that on their own, that just isn't going to happen. And so what I'm wondering is, how have you gotten in touch with your own emotions and learned how to regulate them? Is that so? I'm guessing that there's it takes work and practice and some kind of support. So I'm just wondering.
Well, with schizophrenia, right off the bat, I had obstacles to get over, because that's one of the things is you can't read people as well, and so what ability I did have to do that before I got sick, like through my teen years, was lost. And so anyway, I started reading books on emotional intelligence, and I just started paying attention more to when I'm around people, what kind of emotions can I sort of feel from them, or I was trying to read their body language, and I didn't, it's never perfect. You never know exactly I never know exactly what's going on in a person's mind, but it's something you can always improve on for the rest of your life.
How did you go about, though, for your own self? Because emotions can be very scary things to encounter. And so learning how to identify them and use them appropriately is a pretty big deal. And most people can't do it.
For me, there's an analogy of think of your emotions in your chest, and you can get riled up sometimes. You can be kind of too low. Instead of going up and down all the time, try to think of it as like a thermometer and just sort of regulate it at the same temperature all day long.
For people who are interested in learning more about emotional intelligence, where would you say the greatest resource would be at the moment from the research that you've done?
Well, it's been years since I started reading those books, and I didn't have to read many books on emotional intelligence to get the gist of this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is years ago. But Daniel Goleman is I think he's the founder of emotional intelligence. And then another good one is like the Dummy's Guide or Idiot's Guide, whatever it is, to emotional intelligence. There's look online. There's all sorts of resources on
Mm-hmm.
that, and it's just mostly paying attention to body language and there's books on body language too. Those are good reads.
Well, hopefully the experience that you've had in recovering from your own mental illness and the keen interest that you have in working in developing countries will all continue. And I thank you very much for coming on the show today, and hopefully we'll have a chance to dive deeper into some of these areas in the future. So thank you, Matthew, and thank you for watching the show today. And if you have any questions about this topic or any others that you'd like to see covered on Fundy Tidings, please be sure to let me know. Until then, bye for now.